India's first employee for Canva. She is the Chief Marketing and Growth Officer at Canva India.
The forecast we had for India is that it's going to be one of our biggest priority markets. When the Flipkart opportunity came, everyone I knew told me it was a bad decision. I don't think growth is a single function kind of a role. It's also often very abused. The conversion rate is anywhere between 5 to 10%. There's a difference between a product, a brand, and a company. It's the hardest to build a brand.
Today we have on campus Chandrika. Thank you so much, Chandrika, for coming here. She is the Chief Marketing and Growth Officer at Canva India. She is also India's first employee for Canva. So thank you so much for taking out the time and coming here. It's
Thank
an
you so
absolute
much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. And we're going to be doing a very interesting case with the students, and I'm super excited for that. But over the next 15 to 20 minutes, I just wanted to have a chat with you about your journey, understand the work that you've been doing at Canva. I think Canva is a very interesting company now, worth $32 billion. And wanted to understand nuances like who the customers are, how large that customer base is, how fast it is growing, kinds of customers that use Canva, what their use cases are. But let's start off from the beginning, right? I think CSF is where you worked as leading their communications, and then went to ISB. What was that journey like? Was that your first job?
No, so CSF was my second job. I used to work with this PR firm called Edelman before that, and I had joined there straight out of college. I'm a Bengali, grew up in a house where I was always encouraged to have my opinion. I grew up thinking I would be a journalist, and all my life until I actually did my master's in journalism also, and I actually had a chance to intern with a leading publication, and then got disillusioned with journalism, and I was like, this is not what I want to do, and so decided to pivot to PR because I was like, okay, let me try doing something that is still more communications related. And so joined there, and I had one of the most difficult clients to work with. And
Can you name the client?
I can name them. It was Monsanto. So they're obviously known to be extremely prone to like crisis and like a lot of hatred. So it was a very difficult client to work with. And I was almost on the verge of quitting when I had the opportunity to work with Gates Foundation. And so that's kind of when I got interested in the nonprofit, social impact space. And I thought I could find myself having a career there. And then through some friends, I found out about Central Square Foundation, was really inspired by Ashish Dhawan's journey, and so decided to kind of join. And at that time, CSF was, I think, a 5-6 people team, and they wanted someone to handle their communications, and that's how I joined there and pretty much set up the function over there. So I think I have this something about like joining early stage and joining in a place where you get to set up something is very exciting to me. So started out with like setting up the communications function. And at that time, I kind of was thinking about what my personal career growth would look like. And I didn't see myself, just being a communications person. I think what excites me is looking at consumers' behavior in general and what are the different ways in which you can influence that. And I thought it would make sense for me to maybe get a little bit more insight over there. And that's when I decided to do an MBA and got into ISB. And from there on, kind of that journey continued. So
Communications, marketing, growth, and also sales.
yeah.
Can you, given that you've worked in each one of these functions, could you help me understand the differences or help our audience understand what are the differences in these roles? So let's start with communications.
Yeah, it's actually very different. And therefore, I feel like I've had the opportunity to do all, but I see that it's not like the same skills that are necessarily transferable to each of these roles. Communications, I feel, is a lot more about reputation building, right? It's also completely organic, as much as we'd like to believe that PR and communications is completely organic. It's a lot more about building reputation for either a founder or for a company through, let's say, relationship building with journalists, finding, building yourself pretty much as a thought leader through things like articles. How do you kind of keep yourself in the news at all points of time with people who would be influencers or thought leaders and potential partners? So I feel that is a lot more organic reputation building kind of a channel that you would do, which is through PR and communications. Marketing, on the other hand, I would say is a lot more it's a lot more awareness building, which could be full funnel. It could be either you're trying to just reach everybody who's a potential audience of yours, create awareness about them, among them about your product or brand, build consideration. So these are, I know, buzzwords that we use, but it's essentially about how do you distinguish yourself from other competitors or other peers, and how do you kind of build that sort of brand recall for yourself and eventually get users to use your product or use your brand. So unlike communications, which is just more about how do you build a positive reputation with the brand, marketing is more action oriented towards immediate users to get them to know about your brand, consider your brand when they're making a purchase decision or any kind of usage decision, and then actually getting them to become a user or a transactor for your product. And I think growth is kind of a layer that adds on top of that, which is where that, marketing kind of does the job of getting those users. But let's say growth does the job of how do you get the best of those users. So let's say you have a free user today. How do you make that user a purchasing user? Or let's say you have a user who's come and used your product only one time. How do you get them to become repeat users? So I think the role of growth is more to understand that with the job that marketing has done, which is creating awareness, getting those users, how do you get the most out of those users to actually drive your goals, which could either be user growth goals, could be revenue goals, whatever goals you have. So I think it has a lot more cross-functional implications, which is what does product do in growth? What does marketing do in growth? What does sales do in growth? So I don't think growth is a single function kind of a role. It's also often very abused because it could mean different things in different contexts and organization. But it's a lot more problem solution oriented to see what are the challenges that you face and how do you kind of address those through different levers you have. And I think sales is a lot more lead generation, right? Which is that how do you do, how do you get that customer to pay, or how do you kind of get, like, if you're doing B2B sales, how do you build those enterprise relationships? So it's a lot more lead generation and then kind of getting marketing or, kind of customer support to qualify those leads, as we say, and then have them kind of become users.
That's wonderfully kind of explained. So post ISB, there were a couple of places that you worked at. One of them was Flipkart. Joined at a very interesting time. So do you want to talk about that experience?
Yeah, it was. So actually, I remember Flipkart usually comes to campus to recruit. And the year that I was there is the only year that they didn't come because they had a bad year. Yeah. So in fact, the year before my batch, there were a few people who had gotten campus recruitment offers and didn't join because the Flipkart had delayed their joining or kind of taken back the offers because they were having a bad year. And I had actually gotten a really good offer from Johnson & Johnson, highly reputed global brand. Everything was great about like the role and company on paper, but I somehow didn't enjoy the role as much as I would have expected it to. And so when the Flipkart opportunity came, everyone I knew told me it was a bad decision and told me that, you're leaving a company like J&J to join Flipkart, which is anyway doing so not doing so well. And that was also the time when Amazon had started doing really well in market. So it was all in all a very looking back, it turned out to be a great decision. But that time it was a very, very daunting decision to make because a lot of people told me it wasn't the right move. But I'm glad I did, because I think the main motivator at that time was to do something where I felt like I was solving real problems for a majority of Indian users. And I don't think a lot of companies give you that kind of opportunity as much as Flipkart does. I still believe it's pretty much the poster boy of homegrown Indian startups, has solved all kinds of challenges that Indian users have, pretty much reaches as many households that you can think of in India, right? So the kind of challenges that you get to work with in a company like Flipkart are very, very different. Like, I've had to solve problems like how do we make someone in a tier 3 town transact from someone who is an extremely premium customer to transact on the platform. So the kind of challenges, the kind of users that you're dealing with are extremely diverse and therefore extremely exciting. So I just had that kind of a mindset where I felt like I wanted to do something where I would get a lot more deeper insight into how users in India think, what is it that drives them, what are their triggers, what are their barriers. And I thought Flipkart was the perfect opportunity for me to get that experience and therefore kind of made that move.
And very interesting that you spoke about that example. I think in a lot of places, when I try to explain marketing or growth to anybody who asks me about marketing and growth, my answer is very simple, that you have to get customers to exhibit a behavior that you want them to exhibit, right? Like the way you said that a tier 3 customer to transact. So while you did this for Flipkart, you post Flipkart, it was Canva. Was that the next step? And you ended up being the first employee for Canva in India. So could you walk us through how that came to be?
Yeah, sure. So when I joined Canva, we were kind of starting to see very early signs of growth in India, primarily because of COVID, because that was a time when a lot of people were moving towards online communication tools, collaboration platforms. So I think that's when we kind of started to see a lot of early signs of growth. And today, India, or even then, the forecast we had for India is that it's going to be one of our biggest priority markets purely because of the number of users that India has, right? And the idea was that how do we get into the market to acquire these users and make Canva like a household name in India, right? And it's a very cluttered market. You already have established players like, let's say, an Adobe, Microsoft, Google, who have a lot of the same products that Canva does, but you also have a lot of smaller brands, let's say photo editor apps, graphic design apps that people use, right? But at the same time, Canva has a very unique proposition that it's the only one which is kind of like an all-in-one platform where whether you want to make a presentation, whether you want to make a social media post, whether you want to edit in photo, you can do it all and you can do it for free. Recently, we've also launched AI features and also at that point, the idea was to kind of see how do we create that sort of awareness in market where users understand what the proposition of Canva is. And we started kind of slow. We started with going after, the immediate audience, which is people looking for these kind of solutions. So a lot of our early efforts were just getting the low-hanging fruit, getting users to, become becoming free users of Canva, people who were looking for these kind of solutions. And then over time now we've grown to see how do we expand that user base. But yeah, that journey mainly happened because it's a great product, it's a great brand, it's a great team, inspiring story of the founders. And I personally have been a user, so I saw an immediate kind of connect with the product. And I also connected with the India story and the vision that we had for India.
And so very recently, I also saw the Canva ad. I think it's beautifully made. And there I was just seeing that at least the protagonist in the ad was it was a single customer who was or when I say single, it's not a business or it's not a group of customers coming together. It was a single user who's trying to make a very cute kind of an invitation for a party or a farewell that their colleague was having. So at least my takeaway was that the primary persona or customers, or at least a large part of that customer base that Canva has acquired in India, is usually such kind of people who are wanting to create these very cute invites or gift cards or whatever it is for their family members or colleagues or people that they love. Is that true? And if you had to kind of segment the market for me and kind of just lay down the personas, what would these personas who are using currently using Canva in India look like?
Yeah. So if you look at what Canva's mission is, it is that it's to empower everybody in the world to design. So our objective is to reach anyone and everyone who has a design need. And we're slowly even pivoting ourselves to talk about ourselves as not just a design platform, but a visual communication platform, because the word design can also be very daunting for people, where people think it's a technical task that we have. And that's exactly what we're trying to simplify, that you don't need to be a designer to use Canva. So everybody who wants to communicate visually in any form is a potential user of Canva. So the way that we today segment our users is in a couple of ways. So one is like your regular social media users, consumers who are looking to create content, let's say by creating a social media post or want to share a good morning message on their WhatsApp group or like make a Diwali invite. So these are regular consumers who might have some sort of want to just make their everyday design or communication look a little beautiful. So that's our overall consumer segment that we look at. But there are also certain cohorts that we think are very critical for our growth. So one is education, which is students, teachers, who we think could greatly benefit from our product. So we actually have two products, which is called Canva for Education and Canva for Campus, which is basically the same product as Canva, the premium version, but you give it at like a free of cost or a discounted cost to students and teachers, where the idea is to help them get the best of Canva. So I think as you and I would have also been students, nowadays you have to collaborate so much in teamwork, make presentations, submit reports. So that's a big cohort and opportunity for us. Teachers also, like I think now with COVID, teachers also needed to kind of visually communicate, enhance their classroom deliveries. That's a big cohort for us, which we focus on, especially launching these two products we have. The third one is small businesses and startups, especially because they often tend to be low on resources and so don't necessarily have the budgets or teams to hire agencies or hire designers or have big teams who would do these things for them. And so because Canva is kind of like an all-in-one self-serve platform, the idea is how do you empower small businesses to be able to visually communicate, whether it's through a pitch deck, marketing, all of those things. Fourth is what we call content creators, which is growing as such a big economy, which is people who are storytellers and kind of are looking to create content on a daily basis to keep their audiences engaged. So with our editing tools, with our AI features, the idea is how do we kind of address that audience and also help them become regular users of Canva. And that's actually a very, very cluttered market because there are so many such products that exist. And then finally, there are enterprises, which is like large conglomerates where, let's say, you need collaboration tools, you need presentations, you need marketing materials. So those are the next set of users we look at. So that is typically how we kind of segment our users.
Yeah, and within that, I mean, I'm pretty sure that given how varied these customer segments are, the funnel for them to go from knowing about Canva, that something like Canva exists, to them becoming loyal customers of Canva, I'm sure the steps and the funnel involved for each one of these personas would be very different.
Yeah.
So the way a small business kind of gets introduced to Canva, to a small business becoming a loyal customer of Canva, to say an influencer going from knowing Canva to becoming a loyal customer of Canva, I think has different proof points and steps. So industry standards for these kind of applications, which could be called freemium applications. What percentage of first time users in say a small business category would you say get converted to a paid category, and what would you say is like a good percentage to convert?
Yeah, so in a SaaS kind of product, it's usually if a small business converts immediately, let's say in the first 1 month period, then that's considered to be very healthy if it's about, let's say, 50% of your users who convert. But usually that's not the case. Usually users will take at least about 3 to 6 months of using the product to convert. So in that case, typically the conversion rate is anywhere between 5 to 10%, which is considered healthy because in India in general, for any freemium product or for any subscription-based product, it's a tough job. So you have to do a lot of things like pricing interventions. You have to do a lot of like promotions to see whether they convert or not. So for a user who converts immediately, that ratio should ideally be higher. But in most cases, it looks like 5 to 10%.
So essentially, if on the 1st of January, 100 small businesses used Canva, then in the first 6 months of that year, we should have tried to convert at least five of those into premium paid users, and that would be like a healthy
number,
conversion percentage. What are some of the metrics that you are held accountable for?
So we track, because our focus in India is to acquire users, what we track primarily is monthly active users and how that is growing month on month. And because we're in such early days in India, and given that India is such a price sensitive market, a lot of our focus is today just on getting free users. And it's okay if they come and just use the product, because our job and our goal is to make sure people know about Canva and people come and use the product. So we look at monthly active users as a primary metric.
If you had to give a few pieces of advice to anyone who's trying to break into growth marketing, what is that piece of advice that you would give them?
I think for me, it's been to be very on top of trends, right? Like I feel as a marketing person, as a growth person, you need to have a pulse of consumers. And I think to know what is it that's changing their behavior, what are their consumption patterns like, and when I say consumption, it could be their content consumption, it could be purchase consumptions, anything of that sort. So I feel like having a pulse of consumer behavior is critical for anyone who wants to have a career in marketing and in growth, and therefore, kind of staying abreast of those trends, what your competitors might be doing, or what generally is happening in the world around you. The other thing I think is also very important for anyone who wants to be in a growth and marketing career is to, learn or observe brands that you yourself use as a consumer, and what is it that drives you to become loyalists of that brand, right? Like there's a difference between a product, a brand, and a company. It's the hardest to build a brand because that's the one where you invest most. But if you can build that loyalty, then you have you've kind of gotten a really large base of loyal users, right? Which is what Apple does. They've built a brand for themselves. They're not just a product or a company. And I think that's the hardest job to do. So as a user, if you can understand what is it that distinguishes a product from being a brand, from being a company, and what is it that is, kind of making that shine, I think that can help you with a lot of perspectives to see what you can do in your role to add value wherever that you might be working. So I think understanding that nuance is also very important.
No, thank you so much, Chandrika. This was an absolute pleasure to kind of understand so much about marketing and growth. Thank you so much for coming in. And now there's an entire session and I'm going to be a part of it. And I think it should be a lot of fun. So look forward to that as well. But thank you again.
Thank you so much. I had a great time chatting with you too.
Thank you.